So it seems like you're pointing out some of the differences between Vedanta and psychology. So one of those, you said that psychology comes really is from the individual perspective, individual being separate than the whole. Can you maybe expand a little bit more about where those limits of psychology are, as opposed to where Vedanta needs to take over?
Our beloved Guru Pujya Swami Dayananda Saraswati ji once said, in psychology, there is no solution. In Vedanta, there is no problem. I will try to expand on that.
That'd be wonderful.
So when we were psychology students, we would joke, first you blame the world, then you blame the parents, then you blame yourself, then you start self-improvement. You're never quite done, and sooner or later you drop dead. Okay. So anyway, on a more serious note, I think the strength of psychology is that it helps you turn your outward gaze into an inward gaze. And so psychology can certainly help and ask the relevant questions for the individual who wants to turn inward. So some questions like, who are you as a person? What are your strengths? How has your background influenced you? What are the values that you stand for? What are your life priorities? So psychology can really help us become more self-aware, better adjusted to society, have more meaningful relationships. But that's where the scope sort of ends. And that's why transpersonal psychology has come up to a great extent, trying to draw wisdom from Eastern traditions, because psychologists, therapists themselves started to experience the limitation of a limiting framework. So with all that psychology has evolved, it cannot address the existential condition of being a human being who has a certain date of birth and a certain date of death, no matter how brilliant or how intelligent or how good looking one is. And also in psychology, there is a tendency to problematize situations. You are lonely, it's a problem. Your son rebels, it's a problem. You don't get along with your partner, it's a problem. And of course, psychologists themselves are not immune to these problems. So this human problem of limitation, there is no psychological solution to it, which keeps manifesting as I am not enough. Whatever one does on self-esteem I also do a lot of that kind of work, which is important, but it does not solve the existential issue. And we also must understand the historical perspective that psychology is a very, very young discipline, just barely 200 years old. And it also rests on the framework of reductionism, much like modern medicine does. So historically, because it has evolved from a separation of the church and the state, so values and God were kept conveniently out of the picture. But the human heart longs for something sublime, noble, elevating, infallible. The heart really longs for God. The heart is seeking but does not know. The heart longs for reassurance of that which is eternal. And this is really the starting point for a seeker. So Vedanta begins with validating this human problem and saying, you know what, sweetheart, there is nothing wrong with you. Vedanta will help you to frame the problem properly from the standpoint of reality. And so in that sense, it's like having a dream wherein you are struggling with your job, your partner, your finances, your health, just like how it was depicted in the movie, The Pursuit of Happiness, by the super popular hero who's no longer popular. And as one runs from one appointment to another, suddenly you wake up from the dream and you are relieved. Why? Because the dream was not real. And so when one is awake to the reality that all the experiences that felt very real were transactionally valid, but actually are not real. So Vedanta is pointing to the fact that you are much more than the experiencer that you take yourself to be. And psychology are kind of like the foothills, whereas for me, Vedanta are the tall, majestic mountains. But you can get to Vedanta only if you cross the foothills.
Sure.
At the same time, you cannot mistake the foothills for the majestic mountains.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm hearing that, so Vedanta is really awakening us to reality of what we truly are. Whereas in psychology, we're still in that reality that we are a limited human being and we're trying to solve that the best that we can and cope with the world around us.
Yeah, that's right.
Hmm.